on the dailies today so that as you go out, you already know what's on the headlines, but also get yourself a copy because we'll only look at some of the highlights. And I'll start off by introducing the guests that we have here this morning. To my extreme left, we are joined by Senator Irungo Kang'ata, who's the Deputy Whip in the Senate. Thank you for joining us, Senator.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Michael Agwanda, who's a governance consultant and also a political analyst. Thank you for joining us this morning, Michael.
Thank you.
We are also expecting Ambrose Weda to be joining us as we go along. And straight to the dailies. Let's start off with the Standard, where we have the headline with the NHIF on the spot. And NHIF probe, auditors get death threats. Now, the Standard did reveal yesterday on some investigations that were going on at the NHIF. And this is as the CEO, the NHIF CEO, Geoffrey Mwangi, was on the spotlight by virtue of the fact that there were some details or some documents that they had been asked to present, and they had not done that. But now this seems to be morphing into a more serious thing. Michael Agwanda, let's start with you, with now death threats to the auditors.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
NHIF is one huge help to this country. And I think if there is one thing that we need to thank the Jubilee government for doing it well, it is NHIF. I think it has come at the right time when the cost of medication and the cost of treatment in this country is so prohibitive that if it were not for NHIF, people will be really hurting today. And not only that, NHIF has now gone to a level basically where they can take somebody out of the country and pay for it 100%, including airfares. Now, to that extent, I think the government came up and decided that we will pay more, which is acceptable, and it is helping. Now, to find people that are being used as conduits of theft in NHIF should not be acceptable, and it should be condemned with the strongest term possible. This is happening. You go to some little clinics that are being funded hugely by NHIF in the community. They have no nurses, they have no medicine, but because of the capitation thing, which is there, these people receive huge sums of money every single quarter of
which is supposed to go towards servicing those clinics.
Servicing. But you find a guy has no nurses, he has no drugs, all he does is come and give you some painkillers and then you go home. No testing, but this huge individual is getting a lot of money. I have followed this very keenly and realized that this money does not just end up with the recipient of the person that is claiming it from NHIF, but this money goes back to the directors of NHIF, to the accounts department of NHIF, and this is now coming out very clearly. If you see that a CEO of a government parastatal is being probed, and not only being probed, refusing to release documents and vouchers, payment vouchers, to another government agency. That tells you how rotten NHIF is. And it is not to the service of the people, but the people that are getting these billions and billions of money are not even the hospitals and the patients that are supposed to get it, but these people that are refusing to release the information that is needed.
All right, let me bring in Irungo Kang'ata here, because you're a lawyer as well. And what does that say? What does that mean? What can be done when the whole CEO of NHIF is sitting on some crucial documents that are needed by the EACC?
Well, from where I sit, apart from charging him with failure to produce certain documents, I strongly believe he can also be charged with the primary counts relating to corruption. Because in law, when you withhold evidence, there's always a presumption that you are guilty. And therefore, I would also urge DPP to proceed and charge the two gentlemen with the primary counts concerning corruption. And even if they may not have that primary documents on the basis that they have been withheld unlawfully, one can convince the court to make a negative inference or a negative presumption against these culprits. And a good judge exercising his mind judicially, there's every likelihood that they can get a conviction.
All right, and one of the questions we've asked today is whether we are winning the war on corruption. Do you think we are making progress, and considerable progress? Because you can make progress either way, in the positive or in the negative, or very slow progress in the positive. Irungo Kang'ata, do you think we're making good strides towards fighting corruption?
Yes, there's no doubt about it. You have seen so many people who have been charged in court. We have seen CSS, we have seen PSS, we have seen judges, we have seen members of parliament. We can see that the DPP is doing its best to nail this issue of corruption. But the problem, and I think this is something that we need to sit down in Kenyans and think about it, is about judiciary. I don't know whether it is because we have given them very strong security of tenure, then you have people who are acting with a lot of impunity, or is it because there are people who are not elected directly by the people, so you find they are not sensitive to the needs of the people? We have to sit down in Kenyans and think, what are we going to do with the judiciary? Because surely you cannot have a situation where a person, 3 people have been charged with, let's say, for instance, murder. Then you find the person who is getting bail is the one who has high profile, let's say, for instance, a governor is the one getting bail. That to me is very unreasonable. Or you find corruption suspects, high profile, getting bail or getting conservatory orders, and therefore you are stalling efforts by the DPP to have these people held maybe for a longer period or even to account for their deeds. So for me, I think as Kenyans, the problem going forward, in my own opinion, is we have to have a discussion on the judiciary.
Michael Agwanda, do you think that is a valid conversation that Kenyans should be having? And also just to highlight that the DPP himself has actually pronounced himself on this particular matter, saying that he is getting frustrated sometimes by the judiciary because he brings the matters to court, but in fact, to quote 2 people that he mentioned in that particular complaint was the governor, Okoth Obado, and secondly, there was somebody else, I tried to remember who it was, but he had mentioned who are scot-free right now when they could tamper with investigations.
Mike, corruption, as my good senator here has said, is definitely slowing down in this country. And we have to, whatever we say, however we want to look at it, I think the collusion and the partnership between the opposition and the government has created an ample ground for people in this country to start looking at themselves internally and not come up with such greed that we realized in the last 5 years. In most cases, it is purely political. There are people who are in the government that thought this government is going to change, and once it changes hands, we may not be able to get anything, we'll be kicked out of our jobs, and that insecurity sort of escalated the theft and the wanton theft in this country. As such, we've realized a lot of corruption, but has corruption stopped? Absolutely not. When you have the police force being rated the highest corrupt institution in this country, then you are in trouble. The trouble is when you have the very people that are coming to look at the offenders of the law being called the most corrupt department or individuals in this country, then you will get very little, however much you may be hopeful. But again, when you look at a president that sometimes comes out very clearly and say, what do I do in this situation? I know he's come out very strongly lately and condemned corruption and even sometimes vilified one of the ministers or few of very close associates and saying, if this happens again, you will go to jail. But the same president is not able to recall ambassadors that have been charged in court. If anything, I think you had the DPP come out very clearly and say, look, if you are charged in a court of law for corruption, even if it's presumed that you're not guilty until proven guilty, you need to step aside. Look at what is happening at the National Land Commission, where the chairman, Suzuri, was charged. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence that is out there that were actually given out by his own colleagues. Now, that same gentleman goes to court, and the court forcefully takes him back to his work, saying that it's a constitutional office. Now, when you have people being charged in court and they still go back to their offices and sit, when you have procurement officers come out and told go home for 30 days, 60 days, even some to 90 days, and then they come back and you don't hear anything about it, business goes back as normal. There must be a serious repercussion that if you are charged by corruption like this guys at NHIF that are now being taken to court for abetting corruption, not giving information that is needed.
Is required.
Definitely, these men should not be allowed back in the office. If you are an ambassador representing this country in another country, as our more or less a president in that country, and you are charged with corruption, the best thing to do is to come back and resign or take a leave and say, until this is finished, until it is cleared in a court of law, and my name is cleared, I cannot hold this position anymore. Once we get to that moral standard where basically charged whether guilty or not, you pave way for investigation until the conclusion, then we will not be seeing anything.
Any
but
progress.
last, as I conclude, and I know the media has gone out there and called the deputy president names, and the media has said, where is he getting the money to give in Harambes? And then everybody else is saying, look, that is a stolen money, okay? The allegation is it's a stolen money. I have no way to substantiate that. But when you have every media newspaper and every journalist out there, every TV saying this is money that we don't know where it's coming from, and then you want to fight corruption, and in the eyes of the people that are hearing this, that it's a stolen money, why wouldn't they continue stealing? Why wouldn't we continue having corruption? If they think, even if they think that perhaps the deputy president is not getting this money in a nice way, and therefore, why would the government officers now stop continuing to steal money if they think that their bosses are stealing money? And so whether it is just an allegation, sometimes if you are accused of something several times, if a lie is said several times, it turns out to be true.
It almost becomes truth. All right.
So we need to really sometimes even investigate some of these things that the media is coming out to say against an individual and say we have to stop this.
All right, although on defense of the media, it's probably a report of what others have said. For instance, we have Musalia Mudavadi has been very vocal on the fact that there needs to be a probe into where the money that is donated by the deputy president comes from. But there you go. Let's look at something else. On page 5 of the Standard, this is something that is definitely has been talked about, and it's the blue economy. Nairobi hosts marine meet. It's the first of this kind in the continent, but starting off with Kenya. Irungo Kangata, what Kenyans possibly should hope to achieve out of this conference, but more so the fact that we are sitting in a very good position when it comes to blue economy, when we have the oceans in regards to even our neighboring countries that are landlocked like Uganda. What we should expect as a country to reap out of this?
Yes, number one, we talk of resolutions regarding how to exploit resources in the water sector. We have a situation where the current contribution of fishing industry has gone down. It used to be about 1% of our GDP. It is now going to almost 0.4% of our GDP. From 2014 up to now, there has been a steady decline of the resources that we are able to harness out of the blue economy. So therefore, you may have a situation, we get a good idea, so we resolve how to partner with our neighboring regions. It may also provide a situation where we may negotiate with Somalia. You are aware we have a major dispute which is current before International Court of Justice in The Hague between Kenya and Somalia concerning our maritime boundary. And therefore, maybe it can also provide a platform where we can settle that issue out of court. And the other issue is that we have not been able to establish a coast guard. We didn't have one. That one is going to protect our maritime zone, our so-called exclusive economic zone. And therefore, we may need to link that new unit together with our neighbors, that is Tanzania and also Somalia, how we can ensure the people who come and steal our fish here in Kenya, they don't also get into Somalia and run away, or even Tanzania. So those synergies, those working relationships can only be discussed in such kind of a forum.
All right, and we're looking forward to that. And of course, right here on KTN News, we certainly are going to be keeping tabs on that and following up and giving you updates. It's a conference that starts today and is expected to be opened by the President and the Deputy of the Republic of Kenya. Page 8, Michael Agwanda, how abuse of nomination slots threatens the gender bill. Again, this is the week we're expecting to see whether the members of Parliament Parliament are going to stand up to be counted in regards to the two-thirds gender bill. And there's already wind that it may be postponed by virtue of the fact that we have the Blue Economy Conference. And this is because the PG, which had been arranged by Jubilee, basically for the president and the deputy to whip, as it were, their members towards making sure that it passes, may be postponed. But your thoughts on the progress so far, and are you expecting for it to go through?
No, absolutely
Why
not. I think this is what our laws requires, that we need to have a third of our representative be of, both genders. And we know that the lesser women in Parliament, they tried to raise it up in the Constitution by creating 47 women representatives, which is okay, they got in there. But now the question that everybody is asking, that if you implement this law, then how are you going to get these other added individuals, the 22 women and perhaps another 2 senators, women to join the Senate and to join the National Assembly?
It's 40-something, 43.
43, about 43, yeah. Now, I have been to a nomination. And if you know where the parties, the leaders of the parties, whether it's Jubilee or NASA or ODM, whatever you call it, become animals and they become green when they were red. My friend, it is during the nomination. It is such a time that men do not sleep, and Mheshimiwa here will tell you that it's a time that you don't know whether your name will be at the IBC portal as a nominated or not. And sometimes you have to pay. You got to have sleepless nights. You got to fight hard even for your name to be there. And sometimes even when you've won, you still have to go out there and perhaps even pay some few individuals. We've seen people who have been nominated in Parliament and even at the Senate, and there have been questions about the nomination. How did they get themselves there? In fact, there's been a huge complaint about women being nominated in Parliament, and a lot have been said about them having relationship with the decision makers or paying a lump sum amount of money for them to be there. I think what the Constitution did not envisage is when you have this nomination or if you add these numbers, how will they? And that process is perhaps what is being questioned not only with the male members of Parliament, but also the female members of Parliament. And you've had the debate that has escalated into name calling, but you see these people have all been genuine from both parties. There is a number that really felt that the women number has to increase, and that is what the Constitution wants other than passing this bill. But again, the question that everybody has to ask is, for the past 5 years that President Uhuru was in the office and few years that President Kibaki was in the office, why wasn't this implemented? Why is it coming right now? And so when you ask those fundamental questions and you don't seem to get an answer, then you have people doubting whether they will vote for it or not. As it is today, I think they do not have the numbers to pass this bill.
All right, and Irungu Kangata, is the PG meeting still on for Jubilee? This week, it had been put, I guess, for this week, but there are rumors that it might be postponed because of the Blue Economy Conference.
So far, we have not received information concerning the PG. That information is only coming through the media. And if indeed there was a PG, those of us who are in House leadership would be the first one to know.
You would be aware.
So, but from where I see it, of course, personally as a whip, it is my duty to mobilize people to support government business. And therefore, to that extent, I must support the government bill. But on the other hand, I think the people who are drafting this bill, they ought to have been more creative in trying to address that issue. Probably they would have considered maybe increasing the position of women reps, people who are directly elected by the people, because what I'm hearing members objecting, the basis for the objection, is the whole idea of giving people free seats, taking into account how members of parliament really suffer procuring.
But does that mean everybody else has to suffer? Just because you have suffered,
it is about fairness. Surely it's about fairness. You know very well, you yourself, you really struggle to get this position. What of a situation the other person is just getting it for free.
Just given.
But if, for instance, they would have said, no, we can increase the number of women reps, most likely no one would have objected, because surely this is a person who has some legitimacy. But this idea where the current procedure of nominating people is not objective, is not fair, it tends to favor the elites, is not something that is grassroots driven. Maybe it's something that we may have to address going forward.
All right, and maybe just from your pulse, from putting your pulse on the political temperature, we need to raise, or rather there needs to be 233 members of parliament in the House for the bill to pass. Do you see members of parliament reaching that number again, given that the history of this particular bill is that it has flopped twice, mainly because of lack of quorum?
Well, we shall do our best, because that's the whole role of whips. It is our work to mobilize people to ensure they come to the chamber. But I think as we try to mobilize people, the drafter of this bill ought to be more imaginative in a manner that you can inspire members to attend and vote for the bill.
All right, and as we wind up, I'd like us to just put page 14 on the screen as we are about to wind up, and that's a cartoon today, and it's basically talking about sustainable blue economy. And cheers, our next cash cow has docked. Entrepreneurs basically happy with this happening. So if we're able to display that as we finish our newspaper review, that's page 14 of the Nation. I beg your pardon, page 14 of the Nation, if we're able to do that. And it's time, well, for us to wind up and say goodbye to our KTN home viewers. But those of us on KTN News, we still have more lined up for you. We want to look at and recap what's been happening over the weekend in terms of politics as we move forward. So we're going to take a short break, but do stay with us right here on KTN News. We continue with The Way It Is after the break.